back. Let's talk about the Africa Center for Entrepreneurship and Youth Empowerment, ACEYE, making a strong case for government to cut by half the tax burden on small-scale and medium enterprises. And in its latest Entrepreneurship Freedom Index, the center carried out a region-by-region assessment of challenges entrepreneurs face across the country as they make some recommendations to tackle the emerging challenges. In the studio with me to discuss this is Mr. Emmanuel Akwa, and he's CEO of the African Center for Entrepreneurship and Youth Empowerment, ACEYE. Mr. Akwa, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. So let's talk about this report. But first, give me a little brief on ACEYE. What do you really do? Put it all in perspective. What is the African Center for Entrepreneurship and Youth Empowerment all about? It's a think tank, I believe.
Yes, please. So ACEYE is a policy think tank based in Accra. Primarily, what we do is that we influence government policies on the back of research, and at the core of this is also to promote a free market concept or ideology. If you look at our constitution, the preamble of our constitution talks about government's basic rule of safeguarding our liberties. So that's what I mean, when we decided to set up ACEYE, that's what we decided to do. The story of ACEYE actually stems from having worked with a number of entrepreneurs through state and private mechanism. We realized that most of the businesses were actually not doing very well because of government's unfavorable policies surrounding businesses in the country. And at the center of this, you have young people adversely impacted by these policy interventions. We decided to do something that would help entrepreneurs and at the same time also have a ripple effect on young people. So that's how come we decided to set up ACEYE.
Okay. Yeah. And you've done some region-by-region assessment, and that's, all encapsulated in this report. And so really, what does the report generally say about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country? Okay,
thank you very much. So the Regional Entrepreneurship Freedom Index is an in-country study of all the 16 regions in Ghana, according to a set of indices inhibiting entrepreneurial freedom. And we offer recommendations to improve the list region scores. So since January, we've actually been, gathering data from entrepreneurs across all the 16 regions. And I personally have had to travel across all the 16 regions, sometimes just to validate some of the things happening on the ground. That's not the first time you're actually having this report. The maiden edition was in 2021. So this is the second time we are having it.
You said you wanted to validate some of the things you find on the ground. What's the highlight of it? What have you been finding? What does this report, this second edition, what does it really tell about the environment, the entrepreneurial environment of the country as we speak, based on your findings?
Okay, so two things here. It actually confirms what multiple indexes globally have had to say about our economic situation as a country. So for example, if you pick Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom, it ranks Ghana as 104 out of 184 countries. So clearly you realize that we are not doing so well when it comes to economic freedom. And again, it also talks about, it confirms the widespread agitation and poverty level in the country. Entrepreneurs are really, really suffering. The tax burden is super crazy.
Yeah, it's about taxes.
Across all the 16 regions, talk to entrepreneurs and the taxes, it's too much for them. There is also issues surrounding bureaucracy and of course even trying to get this regulatory license and all that. It's also very, very bureaucratic. And aside the bureaucracy, it also comes with some form of extortion and the level of corruption associated with all these.
So there's corruption, there's tax, the burden of taxes and all that. So what are some of the recommendations that you're asking the government to take note of now as we speak? I know there's some tax incentive that you're proposing. Tell us about the recommendations from this report.
Okay. So before I talk about the recommendations, let's look at, how the regions fared. Okay. So apart from Savannah region, we have 5 different categories. You have the free, mostly free, moderately free, down to the repressed category. It's just the Savannah region that actually fell the moderately free, and that's the middle. And you have about six regions after the Savannah region, and 9 of the regions actually in the repressed category. So it means that if we really want to do well, then we have to help improve the least region scores. Now, what are the problems that are associated with the regions that scored very low? So those are, I mean, our recommendations are actually based on those findings. So the tax...
Are they different from the broader ones that you mentioned, like the tax burdens, the corruption, and the bureaucracy and all that? You're saying that each region has peculiar issues that is affecting the entrepreneurial endeavors of people. Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah,
so you are right to say each region actually has its own recommendations. And we also have the national one. So the various regions, the recommendations that we have for the various regions is what we've been able to, you know, there are some of the things you can't, or some of the changes, you can't have them at the regional level. So for example, if you're asking for issuance of certificates or specific things to be done to that, you can't have the regional bodies of the Office of the Registrar Companies to do that. You can only have that implemented at the national level. So that's how come we have the national recommendations and then we have the regional recommendations. So at the national level, one of the things you realize is that as a startup, if I have to start my business, or as an entrepreneur, if I have to start my business, you have to go to the Office of the Registrar of Companies to get the certificates. There are other licenses that you need to acquire. And all that we are saying is, look, instead of all these licenses, and of course, even if you have to get a tax holiday, that would also have to come with like another process that you have to go through. Why don't we, I mean, make it very, very simple, streamline the process so that once there is the issuance of the business certificates, automatically these tax holidays come along with it. Mm-hmm. Instead of, I mean, having duplicates of institutions and you don't really know what the institutions are doing. These institutions are supposed to serve as enablers, but unfortunately, they have rather become an impediment to entrepreneurial growth.
Okay.
Yeah, so
and that's on the national level.
On the national level.
I'm curious to know what the regional breakdown really is.
Sure.
You mentioned that apart from the Savannah, that was like, what was the word you used? Moderately free. The others are really all the way down. They're really struggling. Yeah. So just shed some light on the breakdown, region by region, if we can do that.
Okay.
Or we have to refer to the report.
We have to refer to the report.
Do that. Okay.
But I can share some interesting findings with you as well.
Yes, please.
So, for example, if you look at Savannah region, Savannah, I mean, scored the highest. The lowest, which is Upper East, they all share borders with our neighboring countries. Savannah to the left, and then to the Upper East to the right. But I would interest you to know that Savannah region performed very, very well when it comes to trade freedom. And trade freedom is the reason why Eastern region actually lost its spots. Remember I said we had done this before, that was in 2021. And Eastern region couldn't, I mean, secure the first position, partly because it didn't do well when it comes to trade freedom. And trade freedom, you are looking at how easy it is to import and export. I mean,
right.
Here in Ghana and then outside, you know. So it's, I mean, there are some interesting dynamics to the reports.
Okay. So, I mean, key amongst your recommendations from the synopsis, the summary of the reports that I've seen, you're asking that some SME taxes be cut by half. And you also touch a bit on the Ghana Revenue Authority. What reforms, really, are you looking to see in that regard?
Okay. Aside being an entrepreneur, one way or the other, we are all affected by taxes, whether directly or indirectly. So for us, what we are looking at achieving would be that government should cut down on, I mean, taxes for SMEs. Because, I mean, it's very difficult. The first 5 years is a survival stage. So if at a survival stage, and I mean, there's that notion that we're entrepreneurs, once you're an entrepreneur, you have lots of money. And institutions are overly extractive. You're not thinking about, okay, what can we do to help the entrepreneurs actually grow? I'm waiting for a day where we would have institutions that would say, look, we have been taking, for example, GRA, you have been taking taxes for you for some time now. Now we want to have a dialogue with you. Let's see how these taxes actually impact your businesses adversely and what we can do. Once we get to that point, I think the society that we are building is just, I mean, having overly extractive institutions.
I mean,
and feeding
something
a big
you said that caught
government.
my eye. You said 5 years is survival. That's half a decade. And most people, most SMEs don't make it to the 5.
Exactly. And these are some of the factors as to why they don't make it to the 5 years. And we are complaining about unemployment. You want to address these issues. Now, if you want to, the same people you want to help are complaining about the tax burden. Why don't you, I mean, stay back? And let me also share something with you, and of course, our viewers as well. Most of the businesses, so the vice president made, I think, prior to they winning the election, he said they were going to move the economy from taxation to production. As part of our findings, we realized that most of the entrepreneurs or businesses are moving away from production to merchandising. Partly because it's very, very difficult to produce here. So they would rather resort to merchandising rather than producing.
What's the difference? What's the difference between producing and merchandising for clarity for our audience?
So producing, you are combining the factors of production.
Right here.
Right here. Merchandising, basically you buy and you sell, just like commerce. So it's very easy for them to do that, because
so like you import diapers from somewhere in China, you rebrand it as something with your name, and then you sell here in Ghana.
Exactly.
So that's merchandising, and that's and producing would have been to get all the raw materials here and produce it yourself here in the country. Okay.
Stated differently, you can also look at, economics, somehow agrarian. So you can also look at the farmers. I mean, those who, cultivate all those things. I mean, one way or the other, that's also another form of production, you feel like.
Mr. Emmanuel Akwa, what will be your final word to our audience?
My final words to your audience, and of course to the policymakers, would be that entrepreneurs are really suffering, as confirmed by multiple indexes globally. And this is the time for us to pay attention to real economic reforms or entrepreneurial reforms, such that, we shouldn't come back talking about the issues of unemployment and underemployment next year by this time. There's an election year. Let's take advantage of the report that we have and make the best out of it.
Thank you so much. Emmanuel Akwa is CEO of African Center for Entrepreneurship and Youth Empowerment. It's a policy think tank. You're hoping to influence government policies for the benefit of us all as citizens. Thank you so much for this report and for spending the time to shed more light on some of the findings and recommendations.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Okay.